Number 1. The Shed. My parents didn't really have the money to buy me the dress that I wanted to wear to the homecoming dance, so I decided to get me a job as a babysitter in order to pay for it. It was a bit of a dicey thing to try and do. I mean, nowadays, people are understandably cautious about having other people not only in their home, but also watching their children. I actually had to take to showing parents my report cards and giving them recommendations from my teachers. I can understand it, especially after listening to all the horror stories on YouTube, but understanding it didn't make it any less frustrating. When I did find a job, though, the people I found it with were very much the opposite of the parents I was normally getting. I had brought copies of my cards and my recommendations, but they seemed genuinely surprised when I offered them. Well, even more surprised than I was that they hadn't asked for them. They almost seemed like they were trying to cover up for not asking and feigned interest in seeing them. I got the job pretty quickly. It was great too because it was a standing Friday job, and it paid really well. Because I had gotten the job so easily, I automatically thought that the kids must be real terrors or something. My own parents were pretty strict, but I know that a lot of parents just don't know how to raise their children right, and they become little terrors. Trust me, I've seen it happen. I was pretty nervous on my first night there, but I was quite pleasantly surprised when the kids were just absolute angels. They were possibly the most well-behaved kids I have ever seen in my life. I was a bit confused still about why the parents had been like that, but I wrote it off as maybe they were just more trusting than most other parents I'd interviewed with. A few weeks after I'd been hired, my friend Jody asked me if I had wanted to go to a movie with her on a Friday night. I let her know that I wouldn't be able to because I had a babysitting job. She often babysat too, and she asked me lots of questions about what the family was like, how behaved the kids were, and of course, what the job paid. While we were talking, I happened to mention the name of the family I was sitting for, and Jody turned as white as a sheet. For a girl who spent several nights a week in the tanning booth, this was saying quite a lot. Jody confirmed the address of the house I was working in, and she shook her head at me, telling me I sure was brave. When I asked her to explain it to me what she meant, she told me that the house was a hot potato in the neighborhood. In her own life, she had seen over 6 families move in and out of it, and that was only when she was old enough to begin paying attention. She then told me that the reason why was because there was a family back in the 1960s that had owned the house, and they had a 10-year-old girl who they had kept locked up in their shed in the backyard. She didn't go to school, and they just left her out there in her own filth. She died of malnutrition at the age of 10. Now let me be very clear. I did not believe her story then, and I do not believe it now. To me, it was just one of those far-fetched urban legends that people tell each other, and through the grapevine, they just get more and more outrageous. But although I didn't believe the story, I was a bit nervous around the house. I never brought this urban legend up to the parents because I really loved the job, and I didn't want to lose it by being weird. A couple weeks after Jody had told me that story, I was babysitting that Friday night. Typical scary story setting, a babysitter on a stormy night, right? Well, that was what was happening. I had put the kids to bed earlier, and it was about 10 p.m. The parents usually were out very late, and I didn't expect them home until close to 2 a.m. I was watching TV in the upstairs den, I was watching The Daily Show when a large boom of thunder almost shook the house. As expected, soon after, the 8-year-old daughter came into the den. "Ah, honey, are you scared of the thunder?" I asked her when she came up to me. The girl, Ellen, shook her head. She then said something I couldn't quite understand, and when I asked her to repeat herself, I almost regretted it. She told me, "No, I'm scared of the girl in the backyard." I was, of course, alarmed, and I asked her what she was talking about. Ellen told me to come with her and she'd show me. I kept hoping to myself that she had just had a bad dream or something, but I was nervous as she led me into her room. She then told me to look out into the backyard. I was scared, but I was the babysitter, so this was the very essence of my job, to protect the children. So I crept up to the window and looked out. And of course, there was nothing there. Turning back to Ellen, I asked her if she is sure that she just didn't have a bad dream. But before she could answer, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. I looked into the backyard, and I will never forget what I saw that night. In the backyard, in the mud, a girl, wearing nothing but a nightgown, was crawling across the yard in the mud. She crawled over to the shed, turned and looked up at the window, and then nudged the shed door open, went inside, and closed it. Terrified, I took the children into the den, and I called the police and the parents. They all came out immediately. The police searched the yard and the shed too, but they didn't find anyone. They did, however, find mud on the door of the shed, and on the floor of the shed, as if it had been tracked in by someone. Now, I didn't believe in ghosts then, and I still don't. Honestly, to this day, I still think this was a prank set up by my friend Jody, but she denies it, and she seemed genuinely scared when I told her the story. Neither the parents nor the police had claimed to have ever heard the urban legend story when I told it to them. But the fact is, I do not know what it was that I saw that night. I have no explanation for it, and even if I did, it was still scary as hell when it happened. Number 2. Sorry, wrong house. When I was 17, I babysat for a house right on the outside of town. It wasn't a rural setting, but just one of those homes that is not on a block in a neighborhood. The house was set off of a local highway and was at the end of a good 50-yard driveway. The father of the family worked in pharmaceuticals and was really well off. We used to always joke that he was only able to buy the house because he made so much drug money. I began babysitting for them 3 years earlier. My parents drove me over until I was 16, and then I got a car. Fortunately, I had a lot of babysitting money from that very job that I had been saving up specifically to get a car. I enjoyed the job, which I guess is obvious since I'd been with them for so many years. I never ran into any serious problems there. At the worst, the kids would get into little fights with each other and things like that. During a Saturday night in the spring when I was 17, though, Something very odd happened. It was raining and storming pretty hard, and I had put the youngest kids to bed. The oldest boy, Bobby, was 13, and he was allowed to remain up until later. I had been watching television, and Bobby was in the other room playing video games. I was startled when I heard a knock at the door. Getting up and wondering who in the world would ever be there that late and during the storm, I went over to the door. Looking through the glass windows on the door, I saw a guy standing there, in a car, running with his lights on behind him. He was dressed in a black trench coat, and the lights of his car were shining behind him, so I couldn't really see his features clearly. I asked him if I could help him through the door because I had no desire to open it up. He simply asked me if Charlotte was there. Well, no one named Charlotte lived in the house, so I told him this. The man said, "Sorry, wrong house." He walked over to his car, got in it, and drove away. It was weird, but I didn't think much about it. I went back and watched TV again. Nearly 45 minutes later, Bobby was looking out the front window, and he told me that there was a car pulling into the driveway. I got up and looked at it. It parked with the lights shining up at the house. A man, in a black trench coat, walked right up to the door and knocked on it. When I asked who it was, the exact same thing happened as before. The man asked me if Charlotte was there. I told him he had already been here, and he had asked me that question before, and I had told him no one named Charlotte lived there. He then said, "Sorry, wrong house again. Can you come out here and help me figure out these directions?" I seemed to be very lost. I declined, telling him no offense, but I don't tend to open the door to strange men. He asked again, and I declined again. He tried being persistent for a little while, but eventually got the picture that I was not going to open the door. He got into his car and left. I looked over at Bobby and commented about it being weird. He looked absolutely horrified, though. I asked him what was wrong, and he just told me not to answer the door if the guy came back, and just to call the police. The guy didn't come back. But when Bobby's parents got home, I told them about what had happened. I also asked why Bobby had been so scared. They told me that before me, they had a babysitter named Blair who used to work for them. Blair had disappeared one night while she was babysitting the kids. Apparently, someone had pulled into the driveway, and they had a security camera set up outside. Not surprising, as I mentioned, these people had a lot of money. The man had been wearing a trench coat, and he asked if Charlotte was there. Apparently, he asked Blair to come out and help him with directions because he said he was lost. Blair did this, and the two of them walked out of view of the camera, and that was the last time anyone had ever seen Blair. I honestly don't know why a person who abducted a teenage girl would ever come back to the same house he had done it. It just seemed stupid to me. Bobby's father figured it must be the vanity of the criminal. He was successful once, and he wanted to try it again. I really have no idea. All I can tell you is, I am very thankful that I did not open that door. Number 3. The ex-husband. I used to babysit for this woman who I always felt should have spent more time with her kids than hiring a babysitter. She had 3 children, 2 young boys and 1 girl, all with her ex-husband. The very fact that she was the one who got custody of them told me that no matter how bad she was, the husband had to be much worse. And just to be clear, by bad, I don't mean that she abused her kids in any way, because I never noticed any sign of that. She seemed to love them a lot. She was just absent all the time. She would go out partying and drinking and come home all liquored up. Often she wouldn't come home at all, and would sleep the night somewhere else, I suppose in one of her boyfriend's houses. My friends all wondered why I kept the job, but I thought it was pretty obvious. She paid me really well for what I did. Plus, it was bad enough that the kids didn't have their mother or father around them very much. I didn't want to abandon them also. And they were really good kids. Very well behaved. This story happened on one of the nights when the mom was out partying, and I knew it was going to be an all-nighter. At about 6 p.m., I heard a knock at the door. Going to it, I recognized the man who was there as their father. I had never met him before, but I'd seen pictures of him so I could be aware if he came over. He was not allowed to see the children without supervision from the courts. The man asked me if he could come in and see his children, to which I of course declined. When he asked me where the mother was, I told him that wasn't his business, and I was their babysitter. He kept on trying to convince me to let him in, and I kept declining. He even tried telling me that he must be a better parent than her, because at least he was trying to see his children, while she was likely out partying. I told him that wasn't any of my business, and he eventually gave up and left. I wasn't really too concerned, but I went ahead and tried to get in touch with their mother. Not surprisingly, her cell phone went straight to voicemail. I tried not to think about it too much longer. I just put it out of my mind. Normally, I would have put the kids to bed around 8:30, but a half hour before then, a storm rolled in. The kids were scared of the thunder, so I let them stay up and watch TV with me. The hub was doing a My Little Pony Friendship is Magic marathon, so we just watched that. At about 9 p.m., I saw car lights pull up in the driveway. At first, I assumed it was the mother getting home earlier. Maybe her date flaked out on her. But that theory was quickly dispelled when the window beside the door immediately got busted in. The kids screamed and got up, and they ran to the far end of the room. Looking at the door, I saw the hand was holding a tire iron, which he must have used to smash the window. The window wasn't big enough for him to get inside, so he reached around and tried to grab the doorknob. I was in a fix. I had to decide quickly whether to call the police or go try to keep his hand away from the doorknob. Thankfully, the oldest kid, the girl, was smart enough to run for the phone and immediately dialed 911. I decided I had to deal with the outraged father. The man was yelling all sorts of obscenities at me, screaming, calling me a fucking bitch, and that if I didn't let him in to see his kids, he would fucking gut me in front of them. Of course, anyone with any sanity would know that was not a winning argument. Thank God the house had a fireplace because it also had a poker. I grabbed the poker, ran to the door, and slammed the poker on the guy's hand. Fortunately for me, it hurt him enough to pull his hand out while he kept screaming at me. It was fortunate because the poker was a piece of junk, and it broke in half when I hit him. In the storm, There could have been no way he could have seen that, though. While the man was still cursing at me, I heard police sirens in between the thunder. The asshole must have heard them too, because he took off. He got in his car and he left. The cops came to the house and they pursued the father, and they found his car outside of a bar. He actually went drinking after I fought him off. Needless to say, he got arrested. The police had a long talk with the mother as well, although I'm not really privy to what that talk was about. Unfortunately for me, the family ended up moving, so I wasn't able to babysit those sweet children again. But they gave me hugs and told me they loved me before they moved. That meant the world to me. I did see the mom again because I had to testify in a hearing with the father. Luckily, that horrid bastard went to jail. Hey y'all, Killer Orange Cat here. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. And please feel free to share it on Facebook or Twitter or any other place that you'd like to share videos. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please feel free to hit the button next to my orange and chubby friend to be informed of new content. If you know any teenagers who have a babysitting job coming up, make sure to have them listen to this. It'll make for a very, very interesting night. Who knows? Maybe afterwards they will have some scary babysitting stories to tell me. If you don't follow me on Facebook, please feel free to visit on the link above and like the page. I do feel I owe an apology to those of you who do follow me. If you do, you know I have this bad habit of predicting when my videos will be released, and I am almost always wrong when I do this. I always promise myself I'm gonna break this habit, but when I think I have a lock, well, I mess up. So anyhow, I'm sorry I keep doing that. Coming up next should be my collaboration with Mortis Media, which will be a total of 6 paranormal stories, 3 on each channel, and my collaboration with the Sinful Savant, a total of 4 scary stories, 2 on each channel. These will be stories that take place on the ocean. And yes, my serial novel will still be coming. I'm just way too much of a perfectionist at writing to be happy with it just yet. But it's coming. In the meantime, thank you for watching, and thank you for all your time and all your comments. And remember to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a killer orange cat might be hiding. Good night.